So in this video, I'm going to show you how to install and configure Hyper-V on a Windows Server 2016. So in the installation, there's not big difference between 2016 and 2019. So I'm going to start with 2016, but then in another video, I'll show you how to do the same thing in 2019 Windows Server operating system. So here I have a Windows machine, which is running on a VMware workstation. So technically we're going to do sort of a nested Hyper-Vs or nested virtualization here. The reason I'm running a virtual machine, so this itself is one virtualization, type 2 virtualization. So I'm going to have a type 2 virtualization server. On that type 2 virtualization server, I'm going to enable Hyper-V. Then we will create virtual machines inside that Hyper-V server. So that's pretty much the lab setup is going to be. So you can see I have got a server here, so which has got a name and there's a IP address. Let's assign a static IP address first of all to this machine. So that would be the best thing to do. So let's see what's the network here. So this is in NAT mode and it should be in 20 series. So let's go and assign an IP into 2.168.20.same. I'm going to give 50 and 92.168.20.2 is my gateway, and 92.168.20. Let's, for the time being, let's keep 2 as the DNS, but if I run an Active Directory, then I can change that DNS, I can change that IP address later on. So we have given an IP address, static IP address has been given here. So all we have to do is we have to go and enable the role which is called a Hyper-V. So click next, role based. So I'm going to tick Hyper-V, add the features, and then click next, next, next. And the interface, this has got one interface, so I'm going to use that interface to configure the virtual machines. Technically, in real world, what we can do is we can have 2 interfaces, and we can give one network interface card for virtual machine to use. The other network interface card, we can use it for the host machine, so that we can use that second adapter for the host machine, so the management purpose IP address, right? So I've added 2 interfaces. Let's go back one more time, the previous, and see. Anyway, it's picked the first one here, but you know that we have got 2 network adapters, so I'm going to use this one for virtual switch, right? Virtual machines require virtual switch, so I'm going to use the Ethernet 0 as the virtual switch adapter. Next, all right, allow this to send and receive live migrations of virtual machines. So we can use Kerberos, or you can use either one of it. So I can use, this is Kerberos, this is sort of a person, or you can use the credential security support provider. So you can use CR, Crits, SSP, or Kerberos, right? So this is not important right now because we're not going to do any live migration, but we can do that, right? Which means that you don't need to shut down when you have 2, 3 Hyper-V host machines. You don't need to shut down the virtual machines before move from one host to the other host. So I can do that later on. I can come back. I'm going to continue. So this is where it's going to save all the virtual machine hard drives. And you can see this machine has got only one disk, right, which is only the C drive. What I can do is I can add a second hard drive here. So on that disk, I can save all the virtual machines hard disk. So let's create a one, create a new virtual disk. Let's say 100 GB. I'm going to give it to 100 GB so that I can have multiple hard disk, multiple virtual machines. Finish. So the second hard disk is installed, right? So you would see the second disk. It's just preparing, but you know you have to format and accept it. So you go to the disk management. So bring this online. So this becomes online, and then you have to do the formatting, right? Initialize the disk. So you can use MBR or GPT, it's up to you, but remember, if it's 100 GB, you don't need to go for GPT. It's all about the file type and the security. So this can support up to 4000 kilobytes MBR master boot recorder. Here it's only 512. So there are differences in things, so but we don't really need to worry about that too much now. So let's go. So the disk is online and create the disk. So let's create. Right, so now I should be able to see my second disk. So I'm going to use this disk to store all my virtual machines because I don't want to put everything in C drive. So let's do one thing. We will go and change this to T, right? Colon. So you can see here the disk name, sorry, E. So I'm going to use E colon for virtual machines, and for configuration files, again E colon. That's a S. Let's remove that. Right, so it's going to save in Hyper-V. Right, next, install. Right, so now I am installing the Hyper-V role. Once the Hyper-V role is installed, I can go through the Hyper-V manager and I can start their virtual machine configurations, right? Or to manage the virtual machines. So let's wait for this one to complete. So while we wait, I'm going to pause the video and I'll start once the installation is completed, right? Right, you can see now the Hyper-V service is installed and it's asking for restart. So let's go and restart the system. So click close and we'll restart the server. Restart. So after we rebooted the operating system, we should be able to see the Hyper-V role must be installed on this computer, right? All right, so it's rebooting now. So once it's come back, let's enter the username password, which I'm using here, the local administrator username password, because this is not in the domain, so this is just running as a workgroup machine, because it's a host machine, so it's just running as a host machine, right? Workgroup machine. So you can always add this to domains for easy management, but for that we have to have our Active Directory domain controller, right? So we'll come back to that in another video. So let's go log in here. Right, now if I go to this machine and if I go to start, let's complete this one. So close that. Let's go to start and type Hyper-V. So if you go to Windows Administrative Tools, it's just quite slow. Let's click on that. There you go, Hyper-V Manager, right? Just open the Hyper-V Manager. We can see the machine we have is Hyper-V. You know that that's the host machine that I'm running here. So if you look at it, this is the host name. How do you find the host name? Just go to this PC properties, or you can go to command prompt and type host name, right? So you can see it's Hyper-V, right? So now Hyper-V is there. We have options here to configure Hyper-V. So if you go to Hyper-V settings, first thing, we can see where does its disk specify the default folder, right? Virtual machine. I'm sure that I changed this one to D drive. Let's go back and change it to D drive so that we know that all the virtual machine disks will be saved in the D drive, right? So here we have, if you look at it here, we have a second hard disk. Oh, the hard disk is not here, so something goes wrong. Let's go to disk management and see what happened to our second hard drive. that somehow become offline. Right, let's bring it to online. Let's go bring online. Yep, so now the disk is online. So let me go close it. It's quite slow for some reason, but I'll have to check it later on. But if we go to E drive, this is where I'm going to save all my virtual machine files, or all my virtual machines will be kept inside this E drive, right? So that's what the location. So okay, it could be because my mouse, right? So let's go first to changes here. So let's create a folder called Hyper-V here, and I'm going to keep all the machines here in the Hyper-V folder, right? So I have a Hyper-V folder. So what we do, so you can see here Hyper-V, right? So I'll virtual disk is where we're going to have the files. So let's create a file called virtual disk as well, a folder here inside the Hyper-V. Let's create a new folder and name it as Hyper-V disk, right? Cool. And I'm going to browse and give that as the location to store my virtual machines. Right, select folder, right? Same thing for virtual machines to keep inside the Hyper-V, right? So you can simply give E semicolon, or if you want, you can just browse the Hyper-V folder, select that folder and apply. Right, so physical GPU, right, and rest of the informations you can see here. We can do a lot of other configurations. We'll do one after the other. So live migration, remember we can enable here live migration, which I skipped that one. Storage, right? So pretty much we have done the basic things, and let's go to virtual switch manager. So this is where we create the virtual switches, right? So virtual switch is the one that all the virtual machines are going to connect to, right? So we have a interface, which is my virtual switch already created on that. Remember when I was installing the operating system, we installed or we created that virtual switch. We can check that if you go to your network adapter option here, right? Change adapter options. You can see there's a virtual switch, right? I used Ethernet 0 for virtual switch. So if you look at the Ethernet 0, right, on TCP/IP, you can't do the changes. The reason why, this interface is binded to the virtual switch here. So if you look at it here, right, this is where the interface is now connected to. For my virtual machine, which my physical machine management purpose, I can use this interface to manage my physical machine. So I can have an IP address here. I can assign an IP address to this interface. Let's say assign an IP 192.168.20.51, and so this is only for the purpose to access the host machine, right? Yep, this is only to access the host machine, right? This one is for your virtual machines to use this interface, right? We're going to use this interface to connect all the virtual machines, and this interface will connect back to my local network. So we have already got a switch. You can create multiple switches, right? So you can create an external switch or an internal switch or a private, which is quite similar to we have in VirtualBox or in VMware Player, right? So that interface is there. What we have to do now, we can just go and create new virtual machine. So click here, virtual machine, next, give a name, let's say Windows 10. I'm going to install my Windows 10 machine. Right, you can see by default it goes to the specific drive that we have already selected. Then go next. Right, but I'm going to ask you whether you want to have version 1 or generation 1 or generation 2. So the reason ones are generation 2, right? So virtual machines generation supports 32-bit and 64-bit guest operating system, and provides virtual switch virtual hardware which has been available for all previous versions. So virtual generation 2 is the virtual machine generation provides supports for newer virtualization features such as UEFI, so which is your BIOS advanced BIOS configurations, right, and firmware. So we can go and give generation 2, and you can say how much memory you want to assign to this machine. It's all based on how much you have got it on this physical machine, right? Then next, and which switch you want to connect. We can see we have got our physical virtual switch. Next, and this is where it's going to save the file. I don't have 127 GB, but say let's see I'm going to create this in 30 GB, right? Next, install operating system later, right? If you have already an image file, you can pick that from here. If you keep it somewhere here, then you can select the operating system file, right? Or you can install operating system from network if you have got it, but I can install that later on. I will come back and mount the operating system. So I'll say install an operating system later. Next, if you have got everything configured, just reconfirm and click finish. Now you can see just create a new virtual machine, but I can't start the operating system installation. The reason there is no image file, right? What you have to do is you have to mount the image file. So you got to have a operating system somewhere so that you can mount it. So you have to make sure that you got a CD-ROM. Where on the CD-ROM, if you go under here, right, DVD-ROM, you have to manage so you have to add this one, and then you have to add the image file to that. So you can add it, right? Click image, browse. But again, remember this is the local machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the image file from one of my hard disk, right? So I'm going to copy the Windows 10 image file. Let me copy that and put it into of course you can mount that USB disk and you can do it, but I don't want to because I'm running virtual machines from another machine or from the hard disk. So if I just unmount from the host machine, then it will stop. So I don't want to do that. So I'm just transferring the files into D drive, which is where I got my image file. So it's just completing, and I can later on delete this image file, right? I don't need it. So let's go here, pick the Windows 10 image, right, and apply. Okay, all you have to do is now just start, right? Not enough memory. Okay, remember we gave only 1 GB, right? So I'm going to just make sure I have got enough memory on this machine. So let's check how much memory we have got on the host machine. It's only 2 GB, so definitely it's not going to be enough. So I'm going to increase the host machine to, let's say, 4 GB. No, 8 GB, let's say. Right, so that's on the host machine. Right, so I applied. It's just going to restart. Cool. Now this is given 1 GB memory. I'm going to just maybe change this to 2 GB. Right, you can see here it's 1 GB. I'm going to change it to 2 GB memory. Apply, start. Right, take the console access now, connect. You can see, right, talking to the DHCP services. I could have done the cancel part, but it would have been faster. So let me go and cancel that and just start again, right? Let's see whether it takes time. No, it's going to take time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down, turn off, and turn it on, but I don't want to look for DHCP. Alright. Yep. There you go. So now I'm just installing the operating system, Windows 10. So install now. Right. So you can skip the license because I'm just running a trial. It's Pro version, so it can be added to the network. Accept, next, custom, next. That's it. It's installing the operating system. So let's wait here to complete this task, and then we'll come back and continue the rest of it. You can see that's now installed. So let's reboot the operating system. So this is the virtual machine running inside of Hyper-V virtual machine, right? So in my network, it's called nested virtualization. Sorry, so you know that it's just because I can't run this Hyper-V on my bare metal machine, so I'm running on a Hyper-V software or virtualization software, which is a VMware workstation. So on the VMware workstation, I'm running a Hyper-V server, and inside the Hyper-V server, we have got all the virtual machines. So this is how we set up the labs for testing purpose. But in real world, we will install this Hyper-V on the bare metal machine, and then we will create the virtual machines inside the Hyper-V. So you're not going to have then the application layer. So that's the application layer is called type 2 hypervisation. Here, this part is called type 1 hypervise. So it's just getting ready. So it's going to ask you to create the standard user accounts, and just make sure you go ahead and create standard users, and then you should be able to do everything you do on the local machines, right? So let's wait for that to complete. It's almost finished. And you can see various options here, right? So for the Windows 10, you can see the Windows 10 machines. The important one is checkpoint. So we do a lot of checkpoint tasks. So just to make sure that you can create, like how you create snapshots in VMware, so we can create the checkpoints in Hyper-V. Also, we can enable replication. I'll show you how to enable replications, but to enable replication, we need to have one more Hyper-V server so that we can replicate the machine. So do this later. Use the expert settings. Here we have additional option. Here we can edit the Hyper-V. This is for host machine configuration. This section is for your virtual machine configuration section, right? So you can configure specific to virtual machine, and also you can configure specific to host machine. Right, pretty much we have done everything what we need to do, and you can assign IP address later on to this computer, right? So standard system, right? Just go assign an IP address, and you should be able to access this machine from anywhere, right? All right, so let's pause this one for a second here. All right, so now you can see the configurations or initial configurations are completed, and we are just about to log into the first virtual machine which we have created under the Hyper-V server. So you can see that I've done here, or I've worked on Windows Server 2016, right? You're not going to see big difference when you configure 2019 Hyper-V. So the configurations are going to be pretty much similar on Windows Server 2019 and Windows Server 2016, right? Skip this step. Create an account. Give your password. Right. Next. Password doesn't match. Okay. So you can see here. Right. Click next. Done. So my first virtual machine is done. Completed. Right. So this is how we configure virtual machines in Hyper-V. So you have to first configure Hyper-V on the virtual machine, and then you have to go create the virtual machines. there are more custom configurations we can do what the virtual machine must do. So let's quickly have some other additional settings. What we have to do, well, I'll do the here. So in Hyper-V, so if you go to the Hyper-V settings, right? So we have got the virtual machine. So we can tell them what the virtual machine should do if there is a power outage or something like that, right? So if you go under here, storage, allow enhancement, enable computers, replication, right, if you go under virtual machine settings, there's an option that says pause the virtual machine or maintain the status. See here, automatic start section, this is what I was looking for. So we can tell them what the virtual machine should do if the Hyper-V machine restarts. So automatic start action, so automatically start if it was running when the service was stopped. So in case if something has gone wrong, if your virtual machine was running when the virtual Hyper-V turned on, then your virtual machines will turn on automatically, right? Always start virtual machines automatically, and you can add some delay. Say if in case if you've got a domain controller and some other machines, you can leave the domain controllers to start first and the other machines to start maybe after a couple of minutes, so that we know that when there's second machines or the other host machines, when they try and connect to domain controller, their domain controller is available so they can talk, right? So you can configure that option, right? So this is for paging, right? You can do then various other options here, right? So you can enable VLANs, right? If you don't want to use this, then you can remove this, right? So you can go here, you can remove the hard disk, right? You can just unplug it here. You can change the processor settings, and you can say whether to use 100% or not. Memory, again, you can say how much you have to use in the weighted memory out of the total one, right? So yeah, so these are the basic settings we have for Hyper-V. So pretty much this is what you have technically in Hyper-V for virtual machines, right? So my virtual machine is here, it's running. Yep. So you can see now my virtual machine has got internet connection too. So if you do Google, oops, yep, there you go, it works, perfect. So you can see it goes to Bing. So definitely it's connected. Yeah, cool. Right. So that's all about Hyper-V. I'll see you on another video.